Howdy everybody. This is a video I've been wanting to make for a long time. And I've been trying to make this, and basically I end up with like 30 minutes of talking. So I was going to make a quick video showing off my coolant-resistant action camera enclosures. This is the current state of development. I think I'm basically done. And I just want to show them off a little bit. So after I finish talking about these, I'm going to show some video that I recorded with this enclosure of milling this enclosure. As you may have guessed, because I've got two different action cameras here, this one here is a GoPro Hero 5 and 6 enclosure, and this one is for a Yi 4K and 4K Plus. I also have modeled a GoPro Hero 3 and 4 enclosure, but I haven't milled any of this like kind of mock-up, this shape, so I don't have any to show here. But I have definitely made a lot of progress since my original aluminum GoPro enclosure that I milled apparently 16 plus months ago. So if you're wondering why am I making a GoPro enclosure, I'll put a link up in a card up here to a video that I made about this one. So, obviously I've got two here. This one I'm going to show the most just because I anodized this. This was supposed to be green, but it came out this color, which is chartreuse. I don't know enough about anodizing to know why that happened, but it's something I'll have to explore. But it's less shiny, or it's less, silver, so it's easier to show on camera. But I guess before I get started, I'll just mention that the newest version has little ridges on the top here, and then some of the stuff on the inside is different too. But being that this is the most complete enclosure, easiest to film, and also I'm assuming most people have GoPro 5s and 6s, I'll show this one a little closer. So here it is. I just want to go side by side and talk about it a little bit. Talk about each side. The front, obviously the most important part of the enclosure. You can see I've got all these kind of like undercuts going on in here. And the opening for the lens also protrudes from the front, basically by as much as I could. My thinking with this is that any coolant coming from the side or, just splashing from some other area, hopefully will hit this and get deflected away from the lens so that it doesn't interfere with the lens in the first place. I guess having said that, the second way that this is supposed to be coolant resistant is it also blows coolant off the lens using compressed air. And that air is input to the enclosure through this integrated push-to-connect fitting on the side here. This is for a 1/4-inch OD airline. And the amount of air this uses is actually very little, surprisingly. Alright, so since this is on the right side of the enclosure, let's talk about the right a little bit more. Being a GoPro Hero 6 or 5, whatever, there's a button on the side. I have the button hole milled here. Honestly, this one is off by more than I thought would be possible, but it's now modeled correctly. But I just have this button plugged up because I don't actually have a button to put in there. Speaking of buttons, I guess move up to the top here. This is the button. I milled this button on video, which I'll put a link to in a card up there. This works pretty good. There's a spring down here that I'm not thrilled with. It's a little bit harder to press than I'd like it to be, but it does work. I guess it's this is the top. The opposite side is the bottom. On the bottom, there's basically nothing except this 1/4 20 tapped hole And I put a little alignment pinhole here too. I haven't made anything to use this alignment pin yet, but I think it could be handy. Personally, I made this little thing. This is just a 3/8 rod, the 1/4 20 stud coming out of it. I can screw it into here and then use this in a indicator stand, indicator holder pretty easily. But obviously being the standard tripod thread size and pitch, you can use any, camera accessory or whatever for that. Or, well, let's say many of them. On the back, I've got another window that lets you see the screen. And assuming this GoPro has batteries, oh, there we go. You can see that the screen, being able to see the screen, allows you to compose your shot. The lens hole here is not like the ideal shape or size, but you can see what the screen's pointing at, which is the most important. It's also nice because when this is inside your machine, and your machine is making all kinds of noises and stuff, it's pretty difficult to hear the beeping of the camera, but if you can see the screen, it's very clear whether it's recording or not, which this one currently is. You can open the case up with these thumb screws. And I guess if I go onto the inside, I'll switch over to this one. I've only got 4 minutes left on my memory card. I'm not thrilled with these thumb screws, but they seem to work. So I'll take the lid off. I've got some kind of foam here to hold the camera in tight. And the camera goes in and out like so. So on the inside here, I show this one because this is the most recent prototype, most recent design. The air not only goes to the lens, but it also hits this hole right here. Short version, this hole is a condensation mitigation attempt, I guess. I'm assuming the air passing across this hole creates a slight Venturi effect, and it pulls air. It probably creates a slight vacuum inside the case, and the warm air that could normally condense against the cool enclosure in the cool lens apparently gets sucked out to the point that it doesn't condensate anymore, or condense, I should say. So that's the point of that. But it is opening up the case to the potential of water just going directly from the outside to the inside. So if you're putting this underwater or anything like that, you'll want to plug this hole with a screw with a small O-ring on it, which I'll throw in there so maybe you can see it. All the O-rings in here are Buna N, and even the foam on here is at the very least neoprene, maybe even Buna N. I can't remember exactly, but all the reason I chose Buna N is because I'm convinced that that's the most coolant resistant that's kind of like available. So there's an O-ring on this lens, O-ring on this lens, O-ring on every button, and also an O-ring between the lid and box of the enclosure. Hopefully that's in focus. So I think that's basically a rundown of the enclosure. Actually, let me take this one off too. Oh, I wanted to give some facts about this thing. So, assuming we're talking about the GoPro Hero 5 and 6 enclosure, I've got the box, the lid, what I call the LCD ring, the lens ring, and 2 buttons. So it's a total of 6 milled parts. 5 of those parts have 2 setups each, and the box has a whopping 5 setups. I don't remember the exact number for this, but this enclosure, the Yi 4K and 4K Plus one, has 118 ops in this and uses 20 tools for the box and the lid. Pretty crazy. The machining time estimate in Fusion 360 for this is 27 minutes and change. So, running out of memory card. So I'll just mention that I recorded video of this being milled with this, but I also rewrote my post-processor, so the video isn't very long because I was testing post-process at the same time. But I'll include some video that I recorded while preparing that at the right after this. Cool. Hope you guys like this. Let me know if you have any questions or anything like that. This thing will be hella expensive if I were to sell them, so I am not going to be surprised if nobody wants them. Okay, see ya. Enjoy the machining. To show the exact distance that the enclosure is from the workpiece, I kind of balanced a tape measure up there. As you can see, the enclosure is mounted to an indicator stand, and on the stand I have this ball head, a very cheap ball head that actually screws into the enclosure. If we look at the side here, we can see that the lens is roughly 17 inches or 430 millimeters from where the tape measure starts, which goes a little bit below the vice jaws here. Check out my bar Z parallels too. I assume a question people would have is how much air does this thing use? So I've got my regulator here, and you can see I broke the glass out, but you can see that the needle is basically at 0. So what I do is I turn the regulator all the way down, and then I turn it up until I just barely see the needle move. There we go. So that's actually basically where I put it. I'd say that's a little higher, actually. So how much air is that really? We've got the hose here. Spray some coolant down. So here's the hose, and you can see that, you know, it's moving air, but it's really not a whole lot. Okay, good, you can't see that. So it's practically nothing. And as you may be able to hear, moving through the enclosure, the air makes a fair amount of noise, which basically renders the mic in the camera useless, unfortunately. So not only is there noise going through here, but I'm assuming the air pressure is having an effect too. So what I've been doing is I'll use the audio recorder on my phone. This phone is supposed to be have a pretty fancy audio recorder. It does seem to work pretty well. This is an LG V20. So the audio that you hear when I actually start machining will be from this, just sitting next to my machine. Okay, last thing about this exact video is I'll be using this camera. This is a GoPro Hero 6, and I've replaced the lens on here. This is an 8.4 millimeter lens, maybe. I got it from a website called Poe Productions, something like that. I'll put a link in the description. The lens seems to work okay, but I don't think they have the correct thread on there, so I basically had to like force this thing in, and in the process of doing that I cracked the lens a little bit, and the lens was like, I don't remember exactly, but like 150 bucks. So, you know, that kind of pissed me off, but it does seem to work. That's nice. So this is what I'll be using. It goes in the enclosure like that. Cool. So the rest of this video should be machining. This camera shoots in 4K 60, so it should be that resolution. The lens gets a pretty close-up view of this, and hopefully the enclosure will keep the coolant out of it for the most part. It can't work magic. The coolant is opaque. You know, there's a thin layer of coolant on here, and you can't even see the metal through that. So like, if there's a sheet of coolant in front of the machining, you obviously won't be able to see. Well, there's the air compressor, good enough time to stop. Right, so machining from this point forward. If I talk from this point forward, I'll put a message on the screen.